We begin with a special grand jury bringing an indictment against the Trump Organization and its chief financial officer. CFO Allen Weisselberg surrendering himself to authorities in New York this morning as charges are expected to be unsealed this afternoon. Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl has the latest.
This morning, after a 2-year investigation into Donald Trump's business dealings, the first criminal charges against his company have been filed and are now just hours away from being revealed in court. Sources briefed on the investigation tell ABC News the charges against the Trump Organization and its longtime chief financial officer, Allen Weisselberg, include tax fraud. Weisselberg has worked for the company since the 1970s. In one of his old books, Trump said of Weisselberg, quote, he did whatever was necessary to protect the bottom line.
Replacing George this week is my chief financial officer, Allen Weisselberg. And you think George is tough? Wait till you see Allen.
Sources briefed on the investigation say the company and Weisselberg are accused of avoiding taxes on fringe benefits, including cars, school tuition, and rent-free apartments. The charges come after the Manhattan district attorney obtained Trump's tax returns and other financial records in a battle that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Trump has long insisted he runs a clean company and that the investigation is politically motivated.
The continuation of the greatest and most disgusting witch hunt of all time.
Weisselberg is the most important person in the Trump Organization who is not a member of the Trump family. The big question now is whether prosecutors can get him to testify against Donald Trump. Deidre?
Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl, thank you. The Trump Organization has released a statement saying Allen Weisselberg is a loving and devoted husband, father, and grandfather who has worked at the Trump Organization for 48 years. He is now being used by the Manhattan District Attorney as a pawn in a scorched earth attempt to harm the former president. The District Attorney is bringing a criminal prosecution involving employee benefits that neither the IRS nor any other district attorney would ever think of bringing. This is not justice. This is politics. Former President Trump not expected to be part of these criminal charges, but the investigations being conducted in New York have gone far deeper than any initial indictments might have indicated. With us now, law professor and former federal prosecutor Jessica Roth, and ABC News' senior investigative reporter Aaron Katersky for more on the legal and political implications for Trump. Welcome to you both. Jessica, starting with you, how significant are these indictments? I mean, they are criminal.
Yeah, it's not every day that you see an indictment against a corporation. It's not unprecedented, but it's certainly not every day, and certainly not against a corporation so closely associated with a former president of the United States, and one that's frankly gone up and back to the United States Supreme Court multiple times. So it's a significant day. How serious it is in terms of the impact on the company, we need to wait and see what the charges are and how they are framed, including what's alleged about who was involved, what the nature of the conduct was, how pervasive it was, and for how long-standing it was. But clearly, it's not going to be a good day for the Trump Organization.
So, Aaron, picking up on that, the big question in this case has always been whether Weisselberg will cut a deal and testify against the former president. How likely is that, and what information could he provide?
Weisselberg has worked for the Trumps since the 1970s, going back to when Fred Trump, Donald Trump's father, ran the family real estate firm. He is long thought to be a loyal lieutenant of the former presidents. But when you are facing criminal charges and you have kids and grandkids, as the statement put out from the Trump Organization indicated, you wonder whether all of this pressure could perhaps turn you from loyal foot soldier into cooperating witness. Prosecutors would undoubtedly like Weisselberg to cut some kind of a deal in order to help them navigate the finances of the Trump Organization. And there may be no one else but Allen Weisselberg who has such a window, given how deep his connections to the former president are.
So speaking of family, Jessica, back to you. How are prosecutors going to put pressure on Weisselberg to cut a deal?
Well, simply the bringing of the charges, the reality of criminal charges being filed really changes the way a person thinks about whether or not to cooperate. Certainly, it's something they would be thinking about in anticipation of the possibility of charges being filed. So this will not be the first time that Weisselberg will be discussing this idea of possibly cooperating with his attorneys, but the reality of charges being filed and the real consequences of that, I think, really changes how someone might well think about what's in their best interest and the interest of their family. But again, we need to wait and see how the charges are framed, what the time frame is of them, what the penalties are that are attached, and then that will impact how Weisselberg thinks about what's in his best interests.
So, Aaron, staying on this family theme, what do these charges tell you about what could be next for the former president and his family members?
At this stage, we believe this is just a first strike. The prosecutors may be building up a case using Weisselberg, using the company itself to eventually get to the former president or perhaps his children or other executives. And we don't know for sure. Once these charges are unsealed, we may have a better idea, but we believe they are focused on certain fringe benefits and other kinds of perks paid to executives, including Weisselberg, things like you heard John Carl talk about, things like school tuition and cars and rent-free apartments. And the question is whether the requisite taxes were properly paid. But remember, Deirdre, these are prosecutors. These are not accountants. They're not just looking for irregularities. They're looking for systemic, sustained fraud in significant amounts in order to make it worthy of bringing criminal charges. So this may only be the beginning. And it's not expected that any of this today is going to include what started this investigation in the first place, and that's hush money paid to Stormy Daniels, the adult film actress who had accused the president of a long-denied affair and was paid off so she didn't talk about it during the 2016 campaign. That payment was arranged by Michael Cohen, who at the time was a lawyer and a fixer for the former president. And then he testified before Congress talking about the way Donald Trump valued his assets when he was talking to tax authorities, and maybe how he valued them differently when he was talking to banks to obtain loans. So all of that is still ripe for the district attorney as they work through 8 years worth of tax returns that he fought to the Supreme Court twice to get his hands on.
Yeah, that's all good points. Jessica, attorneys for the former president say he is being targeted over politics. Of course, Aaron just reminding us of how Michael Cohen went to jail. Companies are almost never charged over employee compensation or fringe benefits. That is the statement. Do they have a point with that?
I can't speak to whether there's precedent for charging companies over fringe benefits. I'm just not aware of what the history is there. But if the evidence is not there, then the charges can't be brought. If the evidence is there, then the charges can be brought, subject to considerations that are discretionary about whether it's appropriate to charge a corporation under the circumstances. And that includes things like the history of the company, the seriousness of the conduct, and how important prosecutors think it is to bring charges against the company if they perceive, for example, that it's a danger to the community. So as I said, I can't speak to whether there's precedent for this particular type of charges, but it ultimately depends on the evidence and whether it's there, and these discretionary decisions about the company, none of which would involve politics.
Thank you so much, Jessica Roth, Aaron Kurteski. Thank you. Stay with ABC News Live all day for live coverage of the indictment of Allen Weisselberg and the Trump Organization.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.